Okay, let's start with poor names. Poor names is one of the most common code smells I have seen over my experience. What is a poor name? Well, we have a few categories. We have names that are mysterious. In this case, what does DR1 mean? What is OD? What is button 1 underline click? How is it different from button 2? What is page 1? If I see identifiers like that, I have to look somewhere else to understand the meaning of that identifier. And this is a symptom of code smell. Your code should be so clean and intention revealing so that the reader does not have to go somewhere else to understand what is happening there. In this example, if I want to understand what is button 1 underline click doing, I either have to look at the implementation of this method or look at the form where that button is placed on, and probably will have other buttons on that form, maybe button 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I may find out that that button 1 means submit order. And that's the reason I call these names mysterious. There is so much secret about them. Now let's see how we can improve this code. Well, for DR1, we can just use data reader or reader. For OD, we can use overdue days. For button 1, if that button is to check the availability of a product in a stock, we can just call that method check availability underline click. And if page 1 is used to view a customer, we can call that class view customer page. Another category of poor names is meaningless names. Look at this method. What does begin check functionality underscore store client-side checkbox IDs array mean? I really can't tell. I have to look at the implementation of this method. And typically, a method named like that is more than 100 lines of code in my experience. And often, that's the reason that the method has a meaningless name. Because when your function is more than 10 lines of code, it's most likely doing too many things. And coming up with a clean, intention-revealing name is not easy. When you keep your methods short, let's say 5 lines of code or less than 10 lines, that method is doing only one thing. And it's easy to come up with a meaningful name. We will see that later in this course. I've seen names with encodings. The encoding you see in this example is Hungarian notation, and that was very popular amongst C++ programmers back in the 80s and 90s. The historical reason behind that was, those days it was hard to tell the data type of a variable. So there was a computer scientist from Hungary, I don't remember his name, and he came up with this idea to prefix variable names with their data type. And that's why this is called Hungarian notation. But these days, Hungarian notation is not applicable anymore. We have really good IDEs. In Visual Studio, if you want to see the data type of a variable, you can just hover your mouse over it and you will see. There is no need to pollute your identifiers with their data type. So in this example, we can just call this max requests. Here is another example of Hungarian notation. What does object collection mean? I don't know, I have to look and see what is stored in that collection. But look, this object collection is actually assigned to a string collection. So it's not really an object collection as in a collection of objects. It's a collection of strings. But what is inside that string collection? I can't tell. If this string collection is used to store the list of countries, we can just call it country names instead of m underline object collection. See, this name is shorter and more meaningful, more intention revealing. Another category is ambiguous names. What does this method do here? Is it telling me if multiple items are selected, or is it to select multiple items? I can't tell. I have to look at the implementation of that method. And again, that's the symptom of a code smell. Here is another ambiguous name. What does incident name ID mean? Well, is it incident name? If it's incident name, then why is the data type nullable integer? So it's most likely incident ID. Then what is name doing there? But wait a sec, if it's incident ID, why is it nullable integer? How can we have an incident without an ID? So this is a very poor name on so many levels. Another category is noisy names. Look at these identifiers. The customer, or list of approved customers. We could just call the first one customer, and the second one approved customers. These names are shorter yet convey the meaning. Okay, now you have an understanding of what are some bad names and some good names. Now let's jump into Visual Studio and see how we should change the name of our identifiers without breaking code. Okay, here I've got a project with various examples of code smells. You can download all this source code as part of this course and practice what we are doing here on your own. So basically what you will see is in the solution, I've got a bunch of folders, each for a different lecture. In this lecture, we're working on poor names. So here's the example I'll be working on. Now, this method 1 is not a good name. What does it do? We look at the implementation and it's basically generating an image. So how should we change this method? I've seen a lot of developers doing it this way. What is the problem with this approach? The problem is you rename it here, but if there are any references to this class, which most likely are, all those references are going to break. Some developers use find and replace, but that's not very reliable because sometimes you might have different identifiers with the same name but different meanings in different contexts. So how should we change names? We're going to use resharper, rename, refactoring. So let's revert this back. What I'm going to do is press F2, and that brings up resharper, rename, refactoring dialog box. And here I can type the name of the method, say generate image. Now resharper knows all the references to this method. So once we do this, it automatically updates all those references. So you're not going to break your code. Let's take a look at another example. Here, this parameter called n. What does n mean? We look at the implementation and it looks like it's the path that is sent to the bitmap. So let's rename this parameter. Again, press F2 and change it to path. Note that it automatically updated the reference here. Same for this b. Look, we have declared this variable here and it's also referenced in 2 places. Let's rename it, F2, and see, sometimes resharper suggests good names for you. In this case, it recognizes that it's a bitmap, so it's giving you 3 suggestions: bitmap, generate image, and image. I prefer the first one, so we just select this, and see, all the references are automatically updated. And last for G, F2, going to use graphics, done. So next time you're choosing identifiers, make sure that the names are not too short or not too long. Make sure they're meaningful and they reveal the intention. And choose them from the problem domain you're working on. So next time another developer is working on that code base, they know what that name is all about. In the next lecture, we'll take a look at poor naming conventions in C# applications.